everyone, and welcome back. If you don't know me, my name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an author of biblical fiction, and I'm also a book reviewer whenever I have time to read new books. And today I'm going to be talking about a few recommendations that I get asked about quite a lot, but I don't always post about just because I feel like not everyone is super interested, and sometimes this can be a kind of niche topic. And that is the best writing craft books or my personal favorite writing craft books. So what that refers to is books that I typically reach for when I'm working on a new book, whether that's outlining or drafting or editing or just anything like that. Books that help me kind of work through the process. All that to say is that these are my personal favorites, and they're usually the ones that I keep on my desktop when I'm writing or working on a new book, or that I travel with if I'm writing on the go or at a coffee shop or something like that. These are some of my favorite resources, and I only have a few, but I enjoy them all the same. So the first one, I'm going to kind of start pretty basic and then get into some of my bigger favorites. But the first one is a very simple, basic dictionary and thesaurus. I feel like everyone has a dictionary and thesaurus in their house or in their pocket or on their phone even. I do happen to have a couple physical dictionaries and thesauruses. Thesauri that I keep with me, but usually, if I'm being perfectly honest, I just use either the dictionary and thesaurus like website or on Google, or I just use my computer. And the reason that having a dictionary and thesaurus handy is so useful and so important isn't because you want to constantly be reaching for it to figure out if you can write or say a word that, is more dramatic. Because I think that's something that we can kind of fall into the temptation of a lot, is creating word soup, right? Where we write something like, oh, the sky was red, but like we don't want to say red, so we end up like looking up all these different adjectives that we can use instead, and then it turns into like the sky was a crimson color similar to that of blood, and it just goes on and on and on, where you just end up using bigger words and more words, and sometimes you end up using words that you don't really even know if you know 100% what they mean. You just know that it was in your thesaurus and it sounded better than just saying a plain old adjective. That's not a good thing. That's not something you want to be doing, but it is helpful if you're saying the same thing over and over again. Like if you find yourself constantly saying that a character is shy, they said shyly, they were acting shy, the character was shy over and over and over again. That's a horrible example, but you kind of get the point where you are talking about that over and over and over again, and maybe you just need to find some more creative ways or some different ways. It can be helpful to use a thesaurus or a dictionary in that instance, or if you're thinking of a word but you aren't quite sure if you're using the word correctly, then you're going to want to look it up. So a dictionary and thesaurus, it sounds pretty basic, but it's definitely useful. So if you're not going to get an actual dictionary and thesaurus, then at least have that tab open on your web browser. The next book is one that I talk about quite a lot, I think more so on Instagram than I do on YouTube, and that is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I first became familiar with Save the Cat, which is the first book in this series, when I was briefly a film student learning about screenwriting and film production. And Save the Cat, the original, was about, writing a screenplay and writing a script for a film. And I bought it then, and I really enjoyed it. And then a few years later, I found out that they were coming out with Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which promises to be the last novel on book writing or writing a book that you will ever need. And guys, I cannot tell you how true that is. Literally every single person that I have recommended this book to has come back from like reading it or even looking at it and thinking to themselves, oh my word, I cannot imagine ever writing a book without this tool. It is so invaluable, such a good resource, even if you're, maybe not just reading it, but just having it around, because what you're seeing on the screen right now is a little tiny screenshot of the book itself, and that is the Save the Cat Writes a Novel beat sheet. But what Save the Cat Writes a Novel really does super well is it goes so in depth onto outlining and how to have a well outlined story, a well developed story with great pacing and all of that kind of stuff. And it uses like examples from popular books. It tells you about word count, about page count, genre expectations. And, this is just a brief snapshot, you guys. Like, certainly this is helpful to see this visual, but the book itself goes so much deeper into this to talk about, what the opening image is, what the theme stated is, what's the catalyst, what does the B story do, why does your story need a B story, what happens at the midpoint, what about the all is lost, what about, things like false victory and true victory and all those kinds of things. And what it does is, it explains all of those things so well, gives you a beat sheet that kind of tells you, of course there's, room for leeway everywhere, but gives you an idea of like, okay, well, if my book is 100,000 words, then I need to reach the midpoint by at least 50,000 words according to the percentage charts that you can kind of see in the book. And the book itself just goes so in depth onto that. So the first, the screenwriting obviously is super helpful, and I enjoyed that a lot. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, the original, but Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody is like literally, if I can tell you to get one book on writing, and you guys, I went to college for writing. I have a degree in English, but this book pretty much sums it all up for you. It is the best book on novel writing. The next book that I want to recommend to you is actually a part of a series, and it's the Emotion Thesaurus, A Writer's Guide to Character Expression by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. I am so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I absolutely 100% know I am, but it is a part of the Writers Helping Writers collection, and there's actually quite a few, and I'll get to that in a second. But what this book does is it's just like a regular thesaurus, except a billion times better. So instead of looking up a word, you can use the thesaurus to look up an emotion. Like, say that I want to portray anger, so I'll look up anger in the Emotion Thesaurus, and the Emotion Thesaurus will have a list of, not only physical manifestations of anger, maybe like clenching your fist or, clenching your jaw or grunting or things like that, but also to help you get into the character's headspace, internal reactions to anger. What might that do to the character's narrative? How might it affect the way they're thinking? What about responses by characters around them? What would characters around them do? Would they shrink back? Would they, maybe try to fight or flight? So, just different responses, physical responses to emotions, internal responses to emotions, mental responses to emotions, all that kind of stuff. And it really just, it can help so much. I mean, honestly, sometimes I think it's easy to be like, well, I know how to write about anger, so what do I need this for? I understand the emotion of happiness, but what do I need this for? And, I get that, but really, it can be so helpful. Maybe you're just not, in the same headspace as your characters, and you're trying to figure out, okay, it's NaNoWriMo. I need to write 2,000 words today. This is supposed to be a scene where my character is heartbroken. And honestly, I'm having the time of my life right now, so I don't really know how to relate to that. You can use the Emotion Thesaurus to look up emotions relative to heartbreak. And, it'll just really help you make your character's feelings a lot more tangible and a lot more engaging for your audience and your reader when you're writing. And like I said before, this is a part of a series. So as you can see on the screen, there's the negative trait thesaurus, the emotion thesaurus, the positive trait thesaurus, which I think I need to get soon, the urban setting thesaurus, the emotional wound thesaurus, and the rural setting thesaurus. And of these books, have 3 of them. I have the Emotion Thesaurus, which was the first one, I believe. I have the Emotional Wound Thesaurus, because if you guys have read my book, then you know that I really love to give my characters a good tragic backstory, and I love to read characters that have tragic backstories as well. It's a guilty pleasure, but that one's super helpful for, emotional wounds, obviously. Maybe, dealing with trauma, past trauma, ways to write about a character who has endured something difficult. And I also have the rural setting thesaurus, which is definitely more helpful to me as a historical fiction writer than maybe the urban setting thesaurus would be, because the rural setting thesaurus, it does the same thing as the Emotion Thesaurus, basically, where you can look up a setting like cave, river, desert, farm, and things like that. And it'll tell you not only physical things you might find at that setting, but also things you might smell, different senses that might, experience different things, and all of that kind of stuff. And all of them kind of work like that. But these are such great tools. And, you might think they're a little bit like simple tools, but they're so useful for brainstorming. If you're facing a block, maybe it can help you break through that block, or especially with the ones like the urban setting thesaurus and the rural setting thesaurus. Maybe you're trying to world build or imagine a world that you've never been to, or a setting that you're not super familiar with or super comfortable with. It can help you think about things that your characters might have to deal with that maybe you wouldn't have considered before. For instance, with caves, it'll mention the cave might smell, it might have animal infestations, the cave might have a bear in it. What's your character going to do if, the cave's actually, if they're sharing the cave with some other creature, things like that. And they're just so good, you guys. I love this series, and I look forward to getting more of them. I would really like to get the positive trait thesaurus and the negative trait thesaurus too. The writer's guide to character attributes and the writer's guide to character flaws. I think those would be super great. The last book that I have on this list is Romancing God, Evangelical Women and Inspirational Fiction by Lynn S. Neal. Now, this isn't necessarily a writing craft book. If you guys know me, then you'd know that last year around this time, I was at California Baptist University. Well, I wasn't physically there. I was an online student, but I was studying through CBU and working on my capstone project for my degree. And for my capstone project, I actually studied evangelical fiction and wrote a 30-page paper on Francine Rivers' Redeeming Love, and how that impacted the evangelical fiction market and shaped what the evangelical fiction or Christian fiction market is today. It was a really long paper, super difficult to write, but I really enjoyed that process a lot. And Romancing God is more of an academic book than it really is a writing craft book, but it's still super interesting nonetheless. I mean, for being an academic book, I actually found myself actually enjoying reading it more so than you might enjoy reading a typical textbook. But what this book is especially good for people who are maybe looking into writing Christian fiction, or have never written Christian fiction before, or want to know more about the Christian fiction subgenre and what exactly that entails. And this book is super good for that because essentially it kind of breaks down the genre expectations of Christian fiction, why people read Christian fiction. There's some interviews and some research there on, what makes Christian fiction successful, the history of Christian fiction. And so it may not necessarily be like a how to write Christian fiction book, but it is super helpful for understanding the genre of Christian fiction. Again, it's one that I read and cited heavily in my capstone project, in my capstone paper, and I really enjoyed it. I think it offers some really great perspectives. So it may not necessarily, be like a step-by-step guide of how to incorporate Christianity into your book, or how to deal with difficult topics in your writing, or incorporate different levels of content in your Christian fiction book. But it is super helpful for, maybe reading about, okay, what percent of readers prefer X kind of content over Y kind of content, and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed it. So if you can get your hands on that, if you are interested in reading stuff like that, then I would highly, highly recommend it. And that just about brings us to the end of this discussion on some writing craft books that I use, or some of my favorite books on the writing craft. Once again, thank you so much for watching. My name is Jenna Van Mourik, and if you liked today's video, make sure to hit the like button and maybe even leave a nice comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to make sure that all notifications are turned on. If you'd like to connect with me outside of YouTube, then you can do so on Instagram, where I am active pretty much every single day, and you can also check out my author website at www.authorjennavanmourik.com for more information about me, my books, and my free resources for you. All of my other social media links, handles, and information will be in the description box below. Thanks again so much for watching. If you know any books on writing Christian fiction, or your personal favorite books on the writing craft, be sure to let me know. I would love to check them out. Have you read or used any of these, and are you a fan? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.